Hello and welcome to a brand new season of the iTnews podcast. This week's episode is brought to you by Arctic Wolf and the State of Security Report. Stick around until the end to catch insights from Arctic Wolf's Director of Engineering, Steve Hunter, on how AI is transforming cybersecurity, helping analysts cut through the noise, detect threats faster, and strengthen defences against evolving attacks. But first, we have Endeavour Energy's Information Security Manager, Gijo Varghese. At the end of last year, Endeavour achieved ISO 27001-2022 certification for its Information Security Management System, a milestone in its ongoing execution of a 2024 to 2029 cybersecurity strategy. We start with Gijo describing his domain function and the strategic pillars that the organisation is working to.
The cyber and the information security team is an enterprise function within Endeavour Energy. We operate across the IT and the operational technology ecosystem. At its core, the team is divided into 5 functions. I have a manager for governance, advisory, and assurance. I have a lead for security architecture across OT, IT. I have a manager for threat hunting and security intelligence. I have another manager who is responsible for security program delivery. And the last but not the least, the largest team is the security technology operations team that looks after and is the custodian of all technology instruments across IT/OT function. We've got roughly around 25 to 30 people at any point in time running cyber core functions for us. For us, the cyber maturity and resiliency is defined by the strength of cybersecurity culture in the organization. And we believe that if we want to really have a stronger cyber defense, you need to have everybody part of the team. So we have 1,700 staff of Endeavour being the cyber human firewall.
You mentioned there a couple of times it's across IT and OT. Do you want to just talk a little bit about how you think of those two different domains in a joined up sense?
It's quite unique, and within Endeavour, being an electrical company, electrical grids are operated in an industrial network architecture. Industrial network architecture is extremely different to a traditional corporate network, which has got a lot of on-prem systems and cloud computing. Industrial networks essentially work in a technology standard called as Purdue operating model. And a lot of complexity is established in the industrial network proprietary protocols. A lot of the industrial grid networks were not IP-based, basically very legacy-based like Modbus and DMP3. So there is a need to really understand the safety level systems, the protocol and its capability, and the behavior in terms of commands operated out of SCADA. So we need to have electricity network understanding with a lot of electricians managing the cyber side of it. It's quite unique and rare, but what we do is teach them, coach them, and mentor to understand that network. At the same time, we've got a corporate network that runs our mail servers, SAP system. We've got that side of it to be managed as well.
And is the idea to have a large proportion of your staff across both IT and OT, or is there still within some of those 5 functions that you talked about, still OT specialists and IT specialists specifically for the 2 separate network domains?
We've got an integrated function, so we operate as a single team. We do have capabilities across. So that's the uniqueness of running cyber in an industrial network organization like Endeavour Energy. We need to really understand the electricity side of it. The same team would have to manage the cloud computing part of it. That's what we do.
Is there a specific information security and cyber resilience strategy? Is there a strategy for each of those areas? Or is this all part of one central IT strategy, which obviously you mentioned information security and cyber resilience feeds up into?
We have a strategy. The strategy is called the Cyber and Information Security Strategy 2024 to 2029. This cybersecurity strategy aligns to our regulatory period. As you understand, all electricity company like the DNSPs and the TNSPs, the distributors and the transmitters, essentially work through on a regulatory period, and we've aligned it to that. But also we've aligned it to Endeavour Energy's corporate strategy as well, which is called the Decarbonizing the Grid strategy. This is an essential part of enabler function for the decarbonizing the grid strategy. We also aligned to the technology strategy. So when we wrote the cybersecurity strategy, we looked for alignment for both of these. Essentially, the strategy is very simple from a cybersecurity and information security is to protect the technology environment and protect customer data. As Endeavour Energy is going through a clean energy transition like all other DNSPs, where we are changing the technology to make our environment bidirectional. Also, with that comes the power that we provide to customers to enable their systems to be connected to our systems as well. What we are enabling to the organization is that safe, reliable, resilient connectivity while we enter into a bidirectional flow of electricity.
Just on that, you've spoken there about the strategy being a 5-year strategy. What's it like to prepare a strategy that's looking so far into the future?
Yeah, it's a very complex process. We basically carry out a very comprehensive assessment before we built the cyber and information security strategy. We looked at internal influences of how the business is going to change in the next 5 years, and we can only estimate how that business changes in the next 5 years. We then look at external parameters in terms of how the regulatory elements change, what are the requirements coming out from regulators. We look at the change in the threat environment as well from an external perspective. And we then evaluated how cyber needs to operate to support and enable these requirements that's coming from internal and external dimensions. Essentially, our cybersecurity strategy has 3 main goals that we want to achieve. The first goal is that we want to embed cyber safety dimension so we can reduce the attack surface across people, process, technology as we move into clean energy transition. The second goal for us is to better detect and respond to sophisticated cyber attacks. We know that attacks are not going to reduce. It's going to be consistent, if not increase. And we want to be ready for those cyber attacks. The third one is more an excellence objective and a goal, which is to be certified to ISO 27001 across IT, OT, and enable maturity standard to security profile 2 of Australian Energy Security Framework.
When I was looking through the 24 to 29 cybersecurity strategy, there were 2 drivers of investment in cybersecurity mentioned around withstand and respond and recover. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about this kind of framing and how it impacts what you do in the direction the organization's moving.
I think what you need to understand is the clean energy transition to really understand what we meant by withstand, cover, and respond. A clean energy transition itself is adoption of sophisticated technology that will enable a digital energy platform. This digital energy platform will enable us to connect to our customers and make our grids bidirectional. Now, for digital energy platforms to be implemented, we need to enable something called hyperconvergence of OT networks to IT networks. So again, giving you a context, traditionally, OT network for the last 20, 25 years were built with the assumption that they would never be connected to IT network or to internet. So they were always segmented and air gap network. But what is happening with these new energy transition requirements is that that particular network is hyperconverging to IT or corporate network. And we are already seeing those hyperconvergence with the adoption of advanced distribution systems and energy distribution management systems coming out. And with all of these transformation, there's new risks to OT environment because they're connected and they would be remotely accessed. And if there is a remote access, adversaries could even simulate a similar element. And so cyber becomes forefront of these energy transition technologies, and we become central piece in enabling those transformation and securely connecting and building resiliency in these networks and these systems. Endeavour Energy is really aware of these challenges, and we are getting ready for that. As part of that, our strategy essentially calls out something called withstand, which means that we need to build a digital energy platform system that can withstand sophisticated attacks. It can then respond with a capability like a specialist cyber team to respond to sophisticated attacks and also recover quickly in case there is an attack in our network. And recover, for example, in such a way that we recover from a natural disaster like bushfire, flood, or pandemic. We just want to be managing our cyber storms in the same manner.
Obviously, just a few moments ago, you mentioned ISO 27001. I understand Endeavour has gone down this path of being certified. Just before we get into the details of that, can we just talk a little bit about, and I know you mentioned there was an excellence reason for doing this, but why was it important to the organization to go down this path, and why 27001 over any of the other sort of cybersecurity frameworks?
It's a good question. I think a lot of practitioners debate over days on which standard to adopt. But I think for Endeavour Energy, the decision was very simple. We wanted to adopt ISO 27001 purely because it aligned better for our organization. The reason that we've already certified to ISO 14000, which is a sustainability standard. We've got ISO standards for asset management. We've also got engineering standards that align like 62443 in the OT network, better with ISO 27001. So that was an easy decision for us to make. But also we felt that ISO 27001 enabled compliance requirements from SOC. So if you look at SOC itself, SOC recommended any of the 4 internationally accepted standards. And we thought ISO 27001 was something that we were in a journey of, and it aligned better into our environment. And we started enabling that particular standard. There were multiple benefits that we saw. One was that we had an opportunity of harmonizing our IT and OT security objectives. A lot of the industrial networks still struggle with disparate understanding and security objectives across IT, OT, and where we saw value of bringing that alignment through this direction. The second big value that we saw was ISO 27001 talks about continuous improvement mindset, and we could adopt that mindset from a plan, check, do and act concept. Lastly, it also supported our risk management requirements. So again, ISO comes from a risk-based mindset, and this really helped us in enabling that.
What's involved in the actual certification process, and how did you actually prepare for that process to occur?
The certification that we achieved in Endeavour Energy is large in terms of its scope. It involves 20 critical locations, 16 substations, 3 control rooms, a data center, and a training facility. And this is something you can't achieve overnight. The reason why we could achieve this certification was we've been investing in aligning to ISO 27001 standard from 2016 onwards. It's a journey that we started with our first cybersecurity strategy. So as I stay here and execute the cyber and information security strategy, this is our second round of improvement. We adopted something we already had and ensured that it was sharpened for the new requirement. The certification itself took 18 months to be ready. And large part of the certification was about really identifying the assets in the OT environment, documenting them, carrying out a risk assessment to really understand what risks existed that we needed to protect these assets on. Then we wanted to go in and understand what security controls they already have, what are the processes that they had. And so we had extensive learning around those controls. And then we carried out comprehensive cyber safety education in the environment. And the biggest element of ISO 27001 implementation is instilling that cyber safety dimension in the organization across OT. Lastly, we also wanted to establish a corporate governance function around security. We established a corporate security council, which was a cross-functional governance forum that looked at all aspects of security, which included physical security risk, personal security risk, supply chain security risk, environmental risks that would contribute to a security hazard. And of course, cyber safety as well. That's been our journey in certifying this environment. We had two partners. The first partner was CyberCX, who helped us in the certification process itself because we wanted to get a specialist organization who's done this, who had the capabilities to do it faster. Also, we had to engage a lead auditor in auditing us. So this is an independent organization that we had to engage who would come in and assess our network. They go into most of the areas in the scope and check whether these security controls that we've documented are listed and implemented, and then they recommend us for certifications.
One of the things you mentioned was around SOC alignment and specifically around harmonizing IT and OT security objectives. I think it's worth touching on the SOC stuff, especially because my understanding was when the 24-29 cyber strategy was originally drawn up and given to the regulator for approval, it wasn't clear even at that time what some of the impact of the SOC requirements would be on the organization. So it'd be useful just to understand how 27001 helps you in regards to SOC, and I presume it has something to do with the IRMP process as well.
This is another big value that I didn't speak about earlier, that ISO 27001 played a vital role in our cybersecurity SOC compliance initiative, essentially because SOC mandates every critical infrastructure organization to build the critical infrastructure risk management plan, which is the CIRMP. And the standard itself is built around risk management and continuous improvement. So the alignment of choosing a standard was most appropriate for this particular SOC requirement. We were able to leverage the ISO 27001 standard and therefore enhanced our cybersecurity posture. In addition, SOC not just looks at cyber, as I said, SOC is much larger. It looks for all hazards across security, which includes personal, physical, environmental, and a supply chain. So we leveraged all of these hazard management because ISO 27001 is much more holistic in looking at those elements.
One thing I probably should have asked before was you talked about, I think, starting out on the sort of ISO 27001 journey way back in 2016. And so there's been this sort of 8-year lead in up to the point where you've actually formally certified to the standard. Maybe if you could just backtrack a little bit and talk about how you were preparing or architecting or designing or thinking about the ISO 27001 requirements in the decision-making that you had around IT or OT implementations in the preceding 8 years so that when you reached this point, you were able to go through that process.
That's a very good question, especially from the life cycle management of 27001, because when we engaged our journey towards 27001, the drive for enabling a management system that will align to ISO 27001 was a regulatory requirement called IPART. In 2016, when we diversified and privatized part of our asset, IPART came in with a distribution license condition that was enforced on our owners. And as a part of that condition, there was a requirement for us to adopt an industrially recognized standard. And we adopted ISO 27001 as a part of that requirement. And we've never gone into certification. The mandate was to maintain an information security management system that adopted the best practice. But over time, ISO 27001 itself changed. There's a newer version of ISO 27001, which is called as a 2022 version. And we had to uplift our internal standards to the 2022 version first. So there was an uplift that we had to carry out, and then we had to expand the scope of certification as well. So there was a two-dimensional lateral movement that we had to do in 18 months' time. And it was partly easy because we had the frameworks and foundational building blocks to do that. All we had to do is now expand it to OT, really understand the risks in there, and then document the risk and put a structured approach in managing that risk.
Another aspect I think that would be worth just touching on was you mentioned earlier one of the outcomes if you had to instill cyber safety dimension across the OT landscape. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit more about how that has played out.
It's just started. I wouldn't say that we are in the end game of cyber safety, but the mindset is very simple. If you go to our organization and ask anybody, what is the biggest risk that we want to manage in the organization, we would say safety risk is the biggest element that we want to manage. We saw an opportunity that as we are moving more into a clean energy transition, tools of the trades are changing from being an electricity company to more a digital company where a lot of the bidirectional flow is enabled by the new digital energy management systems. We have to instill the fact that now safety dimensions needs to consider a technology risk and cyber resiliency elements. And that was one of the elements that drove to this dimension of cyber safety. What we've educated Endeavour Energy staff is that there is technology dimension in terms of cyber security technologies, but also there was a behavioral component that needed to be instilled through cyber safety culture. And that's an ongoing process. There's a huge focus around cyber safety and the adoption of safe use of technology. And that's something that we will carry out as a part of the strategy for the next 4 years as well.
We've talked about a few different outcomes from this 27001 effort. Do you want to just give us a top line what are the key outcomes to have come from that certification process so far? And keeping in mind that this is an 8-year process, so I'm assuming there have been outcomes over the entire 8 years leading up to this point as well.
Outcomes till date has been that we were able to establish a continuous improvement mindset. So we now really have a process to identify risks and gaps in the environment and document them and then put a plan in place and track them. So there is a continuous improvement register that's been established, and we have that across all portfolios of our technology operations, and there is transparency in really understanding what our roadmap is. So that's been a big value. The second big value for us is the deeper understanding of our operational technology network and its interdependencies and the cyber risks associated to it, because we now have a documented risk register that we are managing and maintaining. The third element that has significantly improved, I would say, is the third-party vendor management. We have vendors who manage our critical infrastructure components as well. And now we really understand what are our dependencies on third party, who are these third party, what access level do they have, and how do they use them in case there is a cyber attack. So that's a real benefit through this standard as well.
Setting aside 27001, are there other things that the organisation has done this year that you consider to be particularly impactful in terms of a cyber or resilience perspective?
ISO 27001, of course, was one of the big initiatives that we had. We had 8 other initiatives that ran in the financial year 24. And the top 3 for me, apart from ISO 27001, has been improvement of network visibility of the operational technology environment. So we have a visibility tool that we've placed, and that's pretty good work that I think we've done. The second big one that I'd say was in my top 3 is the improvement of our incident response plan and enabling something called a multi-phased cyber incident response exercise, which not only looked at testing our functional capability to respond to a cyber attack, but also we tested our ELT in managing a cyber incident. We then took the same scenarios to the board of directors and challenged them on how their decision-making processes would progress during a cyber attack. That was a pretty interesting activity, and we would continue to do that and strengthen our incident response plan. The last one, which is one of my favorites, is purple teaming in the OT environment, where we enabled something called a continuous adversary simulation exercise. And we carried that out into our OT environment and into our substation environments, which has been a great learning as well. So really, those are my top 3 projects for the year.
Fantastic. And just lastly, I guess, what's next?
We've got 21 projects to complete in the next 5 years. We clearly have prioritized them in terms of how we would roll them out. One of the big ones that we want to carry out is building a single environment called the Cyber Defense and Response Center for Endeavour Energy. And that's a center that will look at not just the IT environment on a continuous basis, but our OT environment. So we would build a Cyber Defense and Response Center at its core in the engineering network, network and then expand it out into our IT environment. And that's a very interesting journey that we will go through, which will help us detect sophisticated attacks in our grids.
We talked a little bit about partners and you mentioned CyberCX in there. I just wondered more broadly, like from a technology perspective, how you think about technology partnerships within this information security and cyber resilience area, and so what you look for when partnering up with organizations that may be able to assist with the work that you're doing.
When I started 4.5 years as information security manager, we had 72 suppliers just on cybersecurity. And one of the things that I worked on extensively over the 5 years is to streamline that and identify primary suppliers, or primary partners, I call them. And we have 5 strategic partners, and we are ensuring that everything is aligned to those 5 partners. One of those partners is CyberCX, and Microsoft is another partner, and we have another 3 strategic partners, and we align all our technology tool sets, processes around those partners.
I think this is a fairly common approach, at least that I've observed in larger organizations, this consolidation down and this cyclical move away from this huge best of breed ecosystem.
Absolutely. I don't believe in best of breed, but it is more about best of partners that you can work with. So that's the model that we are adopting.
The number of attacks organizations face and their complexity continues to escalate. Collecting, collating, and analyzing the vast quantities of data coming from endpoints, network devices, and other sources is becoming harder and harder. Identifying the signal amongst all the noise requires tools that can find patterns and prioritize the alerts that matter most. Steve Hunter, director at Arctic Wolf, says AI has the potential to change the way security analysts work. Steve says AI can be a powerful tool for security analysts and that it won't replace them.
Data is the foundation for identifying potential security threats. Now, AI not only helps us spot these threats, but it also helps us prioritize them for human attention, ensuring that our analysts focus on the most critical issues first. It's really about finding the most important needle in a big stack of needles. What's new with the innovative AI techniques is that they have the potential to transform the way the security analyst works. We can apply modern AI tools to help the analyst gain rapid context from multiple sources, summarize incidents quickly and reliably, and then communicate this really effectively to those who need to know. However, there is a misconception that we can replace the human analyst entirely with some class of modern AI. What we'll likely continue to see is that the more routine tasks that the analyst performs get automated away, leaving the analyst free to focus on more complex tasks augmented by modern AI to improve speed, accuracy, and efficiency, and ultimately make for a better security operations outcome.
Steve explains that AI is changing the way threat detection, analysis, and response is done.
AI has been used in cybersecurity for over a decade, but recent advancements are truly reshaping the field. AI is addressing challenges in risk and compliance that were previously tough to automate, such as conducting in-person interviews for audit evidence. Additionally, AI is transforming the security analyst experience, aiming to enhance outcomes and reduce staff turnover in security operations centers. These advancements are pivotal because in cybersecurity, understanding the context is crucial. AI tools now assist cybersecurity professionals in identifying and responding to threats more rapidly by automating the analysis of data from multiple streams, drawing in additional context, which allows for quicker and more precise decision-making.
New challenges for extended detection and response.
The capabilities of extended detection response systems has been rapidly evolving, especially with a shift towards cloud-based solutions. Now, this shift started with a focus on leveraging cloud economics for scaling compute and storage, but has more recently been driven by the need to utilize advanced AI capabilities, such as large language models, which are currently most effectively deployed in cloud environments. These AI technologies enhance the Security Operations Center, or the SOC, by improving how analysts process and respond to threats. For many organizations, the decision to adopt cloud-based XDR platforms is influenced by the need for continual innovation, which is crucial for effective cyber defense, because these platforms offer the latest AI-driven tools and are generally the first to receive updates and new capabilities. Organizations are choosing their XDR solutions based on how well these platforms integrate with their existing and planned toolsets, as well as the quality of the analyst experience that they provide. However, it's important to address a common misconception. Some believe that these advanced XDR platforms can completely automate the role of the security analyst. While AI can automate routine tasks and streamline processes, the expertise of seasoned security analysts remains indispensable. These professionals are crucial for interpreting complex threat data, making nuanced decisions, and effectively using these sophisticated tools to bolster our cyber defenses. As organizations deploy and utilize XDR, they must balance the advantages of automation and AI enhancements with the irreplaceable value of human expertise in their security operations.
Used by criminals. But Steve says broader awareness of generative AI is also aiding organizations to become more cyber resilient.
Gen AI has indeed become a potent tool for cyber attackers. We're already seeing this technology applied today in more sophisticated phishing and social engineering attacks, and in scanning open source projects for vulnerabilities at an unprecedented scale, for example. However, there is a silver lining. Thanks to widespread discussions around technologies like ChatGPT and their coverage in mainstream media, our user communities are becoming more aware of Gen AI's capabilities. This awareness helps them understand and engage with the security measures that we discuss, which is crucial for building a cyber-resilient organization. Leveraging modern AI-enhanced tools, such as cloud-based XDR platforms, security analysts are significantly improving their ability to detect and respond swiftly to threats, stopping attackers in their tracks before they can cause harm. So whilst Gen AI presents new challenges by empowering cyber attackers, it also equips us with advanced tools for defense.
That's the episode for this fortnight. Stay tuned for the next episode. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news, head over to iTnews.com.au.